In this video, we're going to go over how to make a tileable texture using Substance Painter. It's not quite as straightforward as other uses with Substance Painter, like we can't just import our models in and do what we need to do and export it out. Since it is tileable, the two issues that come up are that most likely the object that needs the tileable texture has UVs outside of that UV space. So Substance Painter is going to be kind of annoyed by that and not treat it the way that we want it to be treated. The other issue is the way that Substance Painter works is it only puts down texture on areas that have UV maps. So if we try to bring in our object and make it nice tileable, most likely there's going to be gaps in areas that we need it for other areas that are outside the UV space for when it, tiles again. So it just ends up being a giant mess. So instead, what we're going to do is we're going to work with a separate model in Substance Painter just to create the textures. And then we're going to apply them to an object that needs a tileable texture. So for this lab, you are supplied with a FBX that is meant to be a floor. So we have our very simple floor model. We are going to be using Sketchfab to kind of display our tileables, so make sure that before you begin the steps that you do take a moment to upload your floor to your Sketchfab account and be aware that you are going to be expected to submit your Sketchfab link at the end. So, make sure that you're preparing for that. You're going to actually place this on, and in your lecture submission, part of it will be to submit your Sketchfab link for your floor. So take a moment, do that, and when you're ready, let's open up Substance Painter, and we're going to start by importing in that asset. So let's make a new project. The PBR metallic roughness alpha blend is perfectly fine. Since we're not going into a game engine, we're just uploading to Sketchfab. This will work. Let's locate that file, and it should be called trim sheet. We can use these to also make trim sheets as well as tileables, because there is a nice special thing with that, and I'm going to kind of show that to you towards the end of the video so that you can use it for other things. But let's just open that up. Let's change the document resolution to 2048, and DirectX is fine since we are just uploading this to Sketchfab, so we can keep it on that. And then we're going to click OK. So very unremarkable what this model actually is. If we switch over to the 2D only view, you can see that its unwrap takes up the entire UV space, and that's kind of its purpose, is that it's a square plane that fits perfectly in UV space. And in fact, if we go to look at its wireframe, I go in the wrong one, I always lose it. There it is. We can see that it does have a lot of squares, but it is perfectly flat. And we're going to get to, at the end of the video, towards the end of the video, why do we have these squares on here? Like, what's the purpose? Why isn't it just a single flat one? And you'll see, it's going to be super helpful for something. So let's turn that off. All right, so let's kind of begin. So, think of this as a UV space, so that we are kind of building this out, kind of like in Photoshop, we have our plane, like our square. If we were to build this in Photoshop, think of this exactly the same, like this is our document that we're going to build that on. So for instance, let me make sure we're working with starter assets on this. And hopefully at the time of this video, you still have these starter assets. I know they love to change the starter assets on me. So I know usually wood plane or something like wood plane is usually available. So let's work with that. So I'm going to grab and just drop it. Oops, I select my layer over there. Let's drop this in. And we can see that we have our wood grain. We can make alterations to this, if we kind of know that we need to make it bigger or smaller. I do recommend, don't just kind of adjust the tiling willy-nilly. You want to make sure that it is going to tile. So, you know, if we want to make it smaller or bigger, I would go like, you know, a 2, like make sure you're doing whole numbers, like a 2 or like a 0.5 might work too. You just have to be very aware that when you start changing the tiling, you might change how tileable it is, and then that's going to be a problem. Same thing with the offset and rotation. Just be aware of, if you're making any adjustments to that, that it looks okay. So I just want to take this out of Substance Painter so we can see what it looks like over into Sketchfab real quick. So we're going to kind of practice exporting this out. So I'm going to go to File, Export Textures, and I'm going to make sure I put this in a location that I know. Always make sure that you change your download or export out locations so that you can find it later. So let me just make a new folder here for exports, and I'm going to export this out. Since we are just going to Sketchfab, this output template is fine. No need to change that. Size, we could always just double check that it is exporting out the correct size. I'm going to hit export. We can see that we got a whole bunch of stuff out. We honestly don't need most of this, just a base color. We don't have anything emissive. We have our metallic, normal, and roughness, so we are good to go. All right, let's go over to our Sketchfab. I'm going to go to its materials, and I'm going to change out these to see how it looks. So first of all, I do like to do this by going through and just drag and drop. There are other methods we can do this for, but this tends to be the fastest. So I'm going to drag my base color into base color. I'm going to grab, I don't need metallic, it's not metallic. I'm going to grab normal. Whoops, I got to turn normal on first. I always forget that. Normal to normal. And we can do our rough into rough. There it is down there. And we can see it does tile very nice. So, you know, we can pick out where it is tiling based on that. But we can see there's no seams. We get the full PBR to get that. So, you know, that's kind of like our super quick one of how to just get something, create something over there, pull it over into there. Let's make this a little bit more complicated though. You know, this is kind of nice, but it's a little bit boring. We did just drag and drop. So we can still utilize all of our techniques to make this a little bit more interesting. But, you know, we have to be mindful about the tileability of this to make sure that we're not messing with that. But now that we kind of have our Sketchfab going, it can be a little bit easier to see that. So, you know, maybe I do want to change some of the presets. Like maybe I want to, you know, maybe I shouldn't do dark. It's a little bit hard to see on the screen. Light wood. We'll do. Actually, I'm going to undo that. I kind of like how it was. We'll just keep it with this one. But we can add some more interest to it. I'm trying to make sure I find some stuff that you can see. So let's add a fill layer. We're going to make it kind of like a dark. We're going to add some dirt to this. So I might actually kind of use the picker to pick a dirt color. Sometimes it's just a little bit easier than trying to eyeball it. We don't need height. Rough, we do want it. We want it to be very rough because it's dirt. No metal. Normal, do we want normal? Yeah, we can keep the normal on and we'll turn off those. So this will be kind of a dirt layer. Let me add a black mask to this. I'm going to add a don't want to do a fill. Yeah, I'll do a fill layer. But that fill layer is going to be, let's find a nice grunge. Pick one that you like. You know, sometimes a lot of this is just kind of like playing around. So, you know, for this, just kind of find one that you kind of think looks fun. This one looks kind of fun. And we're starting to get our spots. So the nice thing about the grunge layer is these are procedural, so they do automatically tile well. We can play with the balance. Maybe it's a really dirty floor. We can always up the contrast. Sometimes if you're not quite getting what you want, you can always try to invert it and see if that's the look you want more. Like that's kind of interesting to me. Like this kind of looks more like it's a dirty floor, but maybe it got kind of scuffed a little bit. So to me, this is actually kind of a more interesting sort of look. So, you know, take a moment to maybe play around with this. I kind of like that. But the next thing I'm also going to do, because I love to add some variety, I am going to duplicate this layer. I'm going to change the color of this to something else. So maybe something on the lighter side, like a light. But we're going to change out that fill. We don't want that same grunge. So let's change this out to something a little bit more speckly, maybe. What is that one? Not leaks. It takes me a moment. Do I like that one? Fingerprints? No, not quite. There are usually so many grunges. And again, don't try to match the same grunge as me. Most likely you might not have access to the ones depending on when you're doing this, since Substance does like to change, you know, what's the starter assets quite a bit. We'll do this one. It's a little too big though, so let's go up to tiling. Maybe 3. It's a little much though, so let's, no, definitely not an inverse, but maybe just take it down. If it's not quite your thing too, we can always switch it out, but that's not too bad. Maybe the color's just a little bit light. Let's try to change this color a little bit. Raise it a little bit closer to actual wood. And let's do one more on top of this. So I'm going to start with this one again. I'm going to just duplicate this one. I think I want this one to be on top of everything. I'm going to make this a lot darker though. Let's do like a dark, really, really heavy dark. We'll change that too. That's kind of nice. It's a little bit much though. Does it look like? No, I like it this way. Brush pattern. Nope, let's do the whole thing. You can always re-randomize it. So that doesn't work on this one. Oh, there we go. No, I don't like that. Okay. It's a little strong. One thing I can do, remember, is I can just come up to that fill layer and I can drop that opacity down. So I get something more like that. And this looks a lot more fun to me. This is a nice, maybe it's like a wood on like the floor of like a bar or something like that. So it has a lot more character. This is going to be a lot more interesting in our 3D scene. So let's go ahead and export this out. Let's do our export textures. This should all be the same. So I'm just going to re-export those out. And again, as long as you're trying out 3 different, you know, grunginess and you try to make an honest attempt at making it look pretty good, don't try to, you know, don't worry about matching it exactly, like colors and which ones you use for your fill. This is more just to practice the technique. And like I said, it can be really hard to find the exact same thing. Let's replace these now. So let's see, base color, I'm gonna drop that back in. Let's see, I don't need height, I don't need metallic. Let's change out the normal. And let's do that roughness. There we go. We can see it's not super tiled. I mean, you know, we can tell it's tiled, you know, because we made it and we can kind of pick it out. But if this was in a larger environment, like you have some chairs on it, you have other decorations on it, you're not going to notice that this is tiled. It's nice it is the full PBR workflow too, so that we're not trying to make the base color and all of the other ones out, you know, in Photoshop, because that would be a huge pain. So do make sure that you save your settings, and you are going to need to submit the link to your floor for part of this lecture. But there is one last thing I want to show you, and that is, why does this have all of those polys on there? Why isn't it just a single plane? The reason is this, and you might have kind of figured it out too, it's not called Tileable, it's called a trim sheet model, because the other thing we can use this for, and the thing I usually end up using this for a lot, is making actual trim sheets with this. So Tileable tiles in both directions, trim sheets tile in one direction, might have a little bit in other, but the expectation is you're basically making a bunch of tileables on one single thing that tile in one direction. So where this comes in is we can then use all of those polys to help us. So I'm going to call this one wood. I'm going to make sure I nest all of these layers into the wood folder. And then I'm going to add onto this a mask, a black mask, and I'm going to add a fill layer. So, I'm sorry, not a fill layer, excuse me, a paint layer. I need to paint on it. So usually when I'm about to do this, well, I'm going to paint on where I want the wood on my trim sheet. I do usually switch this to 2D only so that I can see it a little bit easier. And the tool I'm going to use is over here. It's this polygon fill. And this is why it has all those polygons, because now on that mask, I can just kind of drag and I can pick where I want that, you know, how big I want the trim sheet. Is very easy. The way that this is split up, you can easily do it in like halves and quarters and eighths. So like we could, you know, decide that, you know, actually, hold on. No, we'll do it this way. We can decide that we want not that much. Let's do half. I'm just going to eyeball this. That looks about half. Close enough for our purposes. We're going to do half of this, and then we're going to do another material on the other half. It is important that we do put all of our textures, like our different trims, into folders that can be masked out of the whole, like the whole texture can be masked out. A lot of times you might be masking out base color, but other maps might still have things going on with it, especially like your normal maps and your height maps. So it's a good habit just to mask out the whole folder and not try to do out the individual layers, because you might miss something. So I'm just going to do like a metal for this one. I'm going to go ahead and, oops, I didn't mean to do that. Sorry. I need to add a new fill layer first. There we go. I'm going to go ahead then, and on that metal, I'm going to add a black mask. I'm going to then add a paint layer to that mask, and then use that special tool to just mask in the area that I want. So I'm going to maybe do this much. Okay, so we now have trim sheet, or we could do it. We could do metal, like a nice metal strip. Let me turn off. Oop, I just have to click it off. There we go. We have a nice metal strip. We have a nice wood strip. The last thing I do kind of want to show in case it comes up is doing an emissive material along the top. so that you can use emissives. If you haven't used emissives yet, let's just make sure you do understand how to do that. So I'm going to make a new folder, call this one light. We'll just do light. And before I go any further, let me mask it out. So I'm going to add my black mask, and then I'm going to add my paint. This one, you know, I don't have anything yet, but it's pretty easy to do this one. It's just going to be these up here. There you go. And let's just do a quick emissive. So let's do a fill layer. And what am I going to start with? I'm going to be a little bit fancy with this. I never remember what we have for starter content. Let's see, do we have a fabric? Yes, let's do a fabric. Let's do the linen fabric. I know it sounds weird, but trust me, this is gonna be fun. I'm gonna rotate that. I don't like it going in that direction. Let's rotate that 90 degrees. Come on. There we go. Do we have any good? No, we can start with the other one. I do want to kind of change this a little bit. Let's go with white. Let's do a little bit of like a yellow. And we have that. Okay. So if you don't have the ability, if you don't see emissive here, we can always add emissive because you can see we have all of these. But if you don't see, we do have emissive right here. But if you don't see emissive available for your material, make sure you go to texture set settings, and you should be able to add a channel for your emissive if you do not have one already. But we are going to add our emissive channel by just turning it on. We can see we're now getting an emissive. And what we can do now is we can actually see what it looks like. There we go. And, you know, even though it's fabric, if we were to put this in a game, the kind of fun thing about this is it would look a little bit like a light, like think of like a fluorescent light with a diffuser over it. It's kind of like a real, you know, there actually are easy ones, you know, easy things that we can do for diffusers, like materials we can find. But if you don't have one, usually a fabric can kind of give you like a nice sort of look with that. Let's see if we can turn off some lights. I always sometimes lose this. There we go. So we turn down the environment exposure, we can see that emissiveness working. So let's get it really low and we can see that. So yeah, you can kind of make like a fake kind of, this would also be good for curtains. You can give a very light emissiveness to curtains, and it will make it look like there's sunlight coming through it. This is a little bit bright for curtains. It's going to be a very bright curtain, but if you want to fake sunlight through a window and you don't want to look out the window, putting an emissive material on your curtains is kind of the way, like the secret way to go with that. But yeah, I think that's it for this. Hopefully you have fun working with making your own tileables and trim sheets. This is an extremely important concept to take with you, especially if you want to do more with 3D environments. This is kind of like what you do to texture environments, is make your own tileables and trim sheets to put on those environments. So, you know, have some fun with this. You're going to really enjoy this when you start taking further classes and model your own 3D models to be able to do this.